Hi, this is Kelsey Cooper, and I'm the host for Disabled Birth Stories podcast. I hope those in the disabled community can enjoy these stories of bringing beautiful babies into the world and the journey along the way. I hope this podcast helps you feel seen, heard, empowered, and capable, no matter your journey to being a parent. I hope those who are able-bodied would listen to empathize with and support their disabled family member, friend, acquaintance, or random stranger. Thank you for listening, and feel free to email me if you have any questions or would like to be featured on the podcast at disabledbirthstories@gmail.com. Thanks for joining us today. After listening to this episode, please remember to rate and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Please also check the description for our social media links and the link to our merch store. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Please consult your medical providers for all of your healthcare needs. Also, the views and opinions expressed by the guests are not necessarily the views and opinions of the host and vice versa.
I guess let's get into the next pregnancy. What is the age gap between your second and third?
2 years.
How was the pregnancy for that one? How was it different?
Because we had the complication with the preeclampsia and the blood clot, we knew that we wanted to have another baby, but I met with a hematologist, I think, is a blood doctor. Yeah, I met with her just to say, am I safe to carry another baby? And then my physiatrist, which is my spinal cord doctor, I met with him to ask if it was safe for me to carry another one. And my spinal cord doctor said, yeah, you can have as many babies as you want. But a hematologist was like, let me just run some tests to make sure you don't have clotting disorders or something like that. And all the tests came back fine. So she said, yeah, go ahead. You should be fine. But once you find out you're pregnant, you need to tell your OBGYN about your previous blood clot and then go on blood thinners. That's what I did. Went on blood thinners right away, and I really educated myself on the effects of the blood thinners, and they were really upfront with me saying there's only one that's safe because it won't cross the placenta, and then when you get close to delivery you take another one, you switch to a different one that will make it safe for you to deliver so you don't bleed to death.
But once you did that, what was the pregnancy like? Was there anything different other than the blood clotting that you had to address?
She was probably my easiest pregnancy. I did get a lot of UTIs. One thing that came up was they did all the labs on me, and they found that I had a lot of protein in my urine, so I had to go see a kidney doctor for that just as a precaution, but nothing really came of that. I didn't end up having kidney failure or anything like that. I was just producing a lot of protein in my urine. But we scheduled an induction for her. So the plan was to keep it as a vaginal delivery, vaginal delivery with an epidural, just like last time at 39 weeks, because they told me in Arizona, because that's where we had moved from Kansas to Arizona. She had told me that you can't deliver before 39 weeks unless there's a medical reason. So we had an induction set for 39 weeks, and labor took a little bit longer, maybe 10 hours, 8 to 10 hours. But she was an easy pregnancy, easy delivery. I did tear with her because her head was so big. So that time, because she was basically full term and she was so big, I did have that, but it wasn't really a big thing. They just stitch you up.
And what was the postpartum like with her? Did she have to go to the NICU or anything like that?
No, she was good. She passed all of her tests. We only stayed for 24 hours. They didn't make us stay for 48 or anything like that. And coming home was good. We had my in-laws here to help take some of the weight off. My husband took some time off of work. So then we were adjusting to 3 kids, My oldest he was 8. So he was super independent, super helpful. My youngest was about 2.5. And then Cora, she was a newborn. So she slept really good. She wasn't colicky or anything like that.
And since this was a different hospital, were you able to get up and move around, and was it accessible for you at that time?
Yeah, they were super nice. It was super accessible. They were a lot more, the nurses were a lot more accommodating. I didn't ask them to do a lot of things, but I think they were just kind of like, hey, this mom has a disability. So they like check on me more often than like the other hospital did. And they sent me like photographers and somebody to help teach me how to breastfeed because I really didn't get to breastfeed the other one. Totally unsuccessful with that. Breastfeeding is super hard. But they were really nice and accommodating with that. One thing that I wish I got with like all of these pregnancies is like more information on postpartum depression, because with Cora I developed really bad postpartum depression, and I didn't have that with the boys.
Was that soon after giving birth to her, or did it take a few months to notice that you were having?
It took a few months. I know for some moms it's like immediate, but it took probably 4 or 5 months for it to set in.
You said there wasn't much information. So what did you do in those cases? Did you just contact your doctor and hope that there was help, or did you have somewhere to go for that?
Yeah, I just didn't want to sound like I was crazy, so I didn't make an appointment with my primary care doctor or anything. I had my doctor from when I got my spinal cord injury back in 2010. I had him on Facebook. So I sent him a Facebook message and I said, "Hey, I don't know what's going on, but I'm super depressed and I don't know, is it like just an anxiety issue? Is it like a traumatic brain issue?" And, because with my injury, I did hit my head. So I do technically have a traumatic brain injury. So he was telling me it's a combination of being, having postpartum depression, having a traumatic brain injury, and then being like overtired or overworked. So yeah, he advised me to go see a psychiatrist. So that's what I ended up doing.
And with this one, was there anything that you planned differently with the next thing, as how well this one went? And with being in a new place, you said you moved to Arizona. What was preparing for the next one like?
The fourth one?
Yes.
Okay, so after Cora, we were like, we got our girl, so you should get a vasectomy. And so my husband got a vasectomy. And a year and a half to 2 years later, we were like, hey, let's have another baby. So he had his vasectomy reverse, which I don't recommend. Like, it was rough. I feel so bad for him. It was very expensive. And it was like horrible recovery doing a reverse vasectomy. Definitely, if you're gonna get a vasectomy, like, you should be 100% that's what you want to do. It's off the record. So anyway, he got his reversal done. We tried to get pregnant with our last one for like a year, and I just like couldn't get like, I felt like with the other two, with Cohen and Cora, I got pregnant within the month. And for this one, we just couldn't. And we knew that it had to be something to do with this reversal that he had. And so we ended up going IVF route with Everly, because maybe if we would have kept trying for like another year, like, it might have happened, but I was like impatient. So I was like, let's try IVF. So Everly was our IVF baby.
And what was that process like, as especially being disabled? Was the clinic accepting of that? And was there anything else you had to do being an IVF?
So the doctor was like, I have no problem seeing you, but let me talk to the anesthesiologist, because he's like, I don't really know anything about spinal cord injuries, and they're the ones that do like most of the legwork with the egg retrieval and the transferring the embryo. So I came in for a consultation with an anesthesiologist, and they were like, oh yeah, heck yeah, let's do it. So there was no issues with like autonomic dysreflexia or anything like that. But the whole process, I mean, would probably never do IVF again, ever, because it is so mentally draining. You have to go on so many medications, and you are so by a calendar, by a clock when you take the medications, and then all the shots, they're very expensive, and I couldn't even give myself the shots because my hands don't work. So my husband had to give me the shots. And if my husband was working late, I had to like call a friend and have my friend come over and give me the shots in my hip. And so when we did the egg retrieval, I just had to have help transferring onto the table. I mean, I couldn't do it myself. I had no autonomic dysreflexia, no bad side effects to the anesthesia or anything like that. And then the same thing with the embryo transfer. We got a lot of eggs. I want to say like 18 eggs, and then 11 of them fertilized. So we had like a good number of embryos, which I know is not the case for a lot of other women, unfortunately. So the good thing about our IVF journey was that the first embryo transfer took, and she grew into, a positive, healthy pregnancy, which is also not the case for a lot of women.
And you said it was more by a book and timetable. Was there, with the pregnancy, did they have different things you needed to do during the pregnancy, being as it was an IVF pregnancy?
Like what?
Like, was there any extra testing or anything like that?
Oh, they offered like genetic testing, but it was gonna be like an extra $4,000. And at the time, I didn't think that genetic testing was necessary because we already had 2 healthy kids. I do recommend getting genetic testing if it's like your first baby, or I don't know. If we could afford it, we probably would have done genetic testing, because I've like read so much about it since we've had the whole thing done.
And so was there a timetable as far as like induction? Did they want to do the 39-week thing again, or were you able to go on your own?
It was still the same plan, 39-week induction, still got a lot of UTIs, like still was on blood thinners, everything was fine. I didn't really get sick with her, so I mean, that was good. I did get really, really big with her though. But the plan was to induce at 39 weeks. But my doctor I was having a lot of like Braxton Hicks and a lot of like false contractions and scares like that. I ended up going to labor and delivery probably 3 times to be monitored, just because like it's so hard when you don't have the sensation level that a normal person does. You're just like, what was that? What? And so like I had his cell phone number in my phone, and I would text him like, hey, is this normal or is that normal? And then most of the time he would either say yeah, but there were a couple times that he sent me to labor and delivery to be monitored, and he was kind of like, I think we should do this at 37 weeks because like you're showing, I think I was probably dilated to a 3 at that point, and it was very like unplanned, very last minute, where he had to consult with, he was my regular OBGYN. He had to consult with my high risk OBGYN and basically get permission and see if they were on the same wavelength, like if they were in agreement that it needed to be sooner. And they agreed that because I was already dilated at a 3 and I was having symptoms of possible contractions, they would probably induce me like the day that I turned 37 weeks with her.
Mm-hmm. And so what was going in for 37 like? Were you prepared as far as, it being a little earlier than you planned?
Yeah, I mean, I was ready because my oldest, Carter, was born at 37 weeks, so I knew that it was probably going to be fine, and she was measuring fine. I had a ton of ultrasounds with her. Probably every single doctor's appointment I had was an ultrasound, And so I felt good. She was never breech or anything like that. Kicks were good. So I was really ready to get her out. I mean, like they hospitalized me on, I want to say like 2 or 3 days before I gave birth to her because they wanted to monitor. But then like the day that it turned 37 weeks, they were like, okay, let's go. The only, so one of the complications we had was I had gained a lot of weight with her, and the anesthesiologist couldn't really place my epidural successfully the first time. It took a couple times for him to get it, and it was like pretty painful.
So what, after the epidural, was it similar to your other pregnancies, or was there anything different as far as this one?
She was probably the worst labor and delivery experience I've ever had out of all four. She took 23 hours to come. I could not dilate past a 6. They ended up using like the balloons that they put inside. They put like the balloons inside to make you dilate faster. And those worked, but my water wouldn't break. They ended up breaking my water for me. And then I wasn't progressing still. And my doctor said, oh, we might have to like we might have to put your water back. And I was like, what? You can do that? And he said, yeah, we just put saline up there basically. And I was like, okay. So they had to put saline back up there because it was taking too long for me to progress. We actually talked about possibly doing a C-section because she was just chilling there, like nothing was happening, and like my water was technically broken. So I was lucky enough when I finally I was dilated at an 8. I remember it was like super early in the morning, and I was trying to use the peanut ball again, and it wasn't really working. But with her, something was really jacked up with my epidural because I couldn't feel anything. And so my doctor came in to check on me, and he was like, I see her head. And I was like, what? Because I felt all my other ones, but I didn't feel her. So I was like, how long has she been down there? Like, so it was crazy. And I lost a ton of blood with her. I had to get a blood transfusion with her because I ended up hemorrhaging. So she was for sure the last pregnancy, labor and delivery ever.
After she was born, you said you had a hemorrhage. What was that like? You didn't have any of that with the others, right?
I didn't. And I don't know if it was because of my blood thinners. I don't know why I did it, but it was like they took her out and then I lost all this blood and they were trying to get her to cry. It took a little bit to get her to cry, but it was almost like my mind just went cloudy and I was dizzy and I was cold. And I mean, they kind of like he had to call for way more nurses to come in and the second doctor to come in because they were trying to tend to her, but somebody needed to tend to me too and get like the placenta out. Because if you don't get the placenta out, then that's dangerous. After it was all said and done, I mean, I didn't want to hold her at first because I felt like I was going to drop her. That's how lightheaded I was.
Were you there longer because of that, or was there a typical 24-hour stay for that one?
One of the doctors wanted to keep me longer, but my doctor that delivered, I ended up being fine afterwards. I didn't have to get sewn up. I didn't, like, after I got my blood and everything, he gave me like a medication, but all my vitals were fine. They checked the vitals more frequently than they did for like other people. But, and they also put me on like a high risk unit for, I guess it's for like other mothers that go through trauma during delivery or go through like blood loss and just complications and stuff like that. And I had never been on one of those floors, but yeah, they did all the things and I was able to go home after like a day and a half, maybe.
Was there a difference going home with those complications, or had they cleared up by the time you were discharged for the most part?
They pretty much cleared up by the time I was discharged. I still was a little bit lightheaded, but that's kind of like, I didn't know if it was a labor and delivery thing or a quadriplegic thing. So I definitely took like the next few days to rest after we brought her home.
With the 4 now, how is that different?
It was definitely different with her. My oldest, there's 12 years between the two. So my oldest was super helpful. He still is. She's actually about to turn 2 this week. So the only thing was she just like, I just didn't want to put her down. Because I knew she was going to be my last baby. I didn't get postpartum depression or anything like that, but my other daughter just like adored her. So our family dynamics were really, really great. All my kids were super good with her, and they still are.
I guess to wrap up, what would you say to other moms who are disabled and thinking about motherhood or a quadriplegic in the same situation?
I would definitely recommend doing your research. I mean, I know like accidents happen and like all these great surprises happen, but doing your research really like will prepare you for, I mean, anything. And there have been so many other moms with disabilities who have given birth versus like the first time I gave birth, I felt like there was no literature on it. But I highly recommend like joining support groups and asking questions and advocating for yourself, because that'll get you a long ways.
Are there any resources or places that you know of that they could reach out to, or is it just on social media where you found your...
Yeah, there's a couple Facebook groups on that are based on, they're like motherhood groups for other women in wheelchairs. And there's one on Instagram that I'm part of for people with disabilities, not just people in wheelchairs. So yeah, I definitely, and then like I recommend reaching out to like other women who have had children with disabilities. I mean, like I didn't when I had Cohen, I didn't have anybody, and it was like a super lonely feeling because I felt like I was the only person in a wheelchair that was a mom. But by the time I had Everly back in 2022, I was like connected with a lot of other moms at the same time. So that was really great.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your stories with us. And I'm glad we finally got to connect and meet up. But thank you for coming on and sharing with me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for listening, and feel free to email me if you have any questions or would like to be featured on the podcast at disabledbirthstories@gmail.com.